Welcome back to Proxam, everybody. And today we're going to be doing an advanced tactics video on advanced positions. So this is a rule that several Eldar units have, and it's something that has slipped my radar for a while now. And I thought I'd revisit it after getting some inspiration from some of my previous games. And I thought I would give you guys a little bit of a tutorial on the best ways to use this for each unit that has it. So what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be first explaining what advanced positions is and how it works for the Eldar. We're going to be looking at which units have advanced positions and how they use it to their advantage. Different units use it in different ways. And we're going to be going over a few examples of how to make the most out of your advanced position units using this ability. So advanced positions is pretty straightforward. When you're deploying, when you set up the unit, you can set up the unit anywhere on the battlefield, not just in your own deployment zone, as long as you are more than 9 inches away from both the enemy deployment zone and any enemy model. That means that if other enemy models are using advanced positions and they set up before you, you have to stay outside of 9 inches of those models or any other models that are enemies on the board. Now, the cool thing about this is that it can be used in a multitude of different ways. It can be used offensively, defensively, or to get and score on objectives, depending on which unit has the advanced positions and what your goal is for that unit. So currently there's 3 main units that use it. Now, I'm not talking about special characters. I know that Illic Knightspear and Khandras also have advanced positions, but I'm not going to talk about them because, well, to be honest, they are going to kind of have the same role as these units anyway, so it would be kind of redundant to go over them. But basically 3 units have it: Striking Scorpions, Rangers, and Warwalkers. And each of these units uses advanced positions in a completely different way to be able to gain an advantage in the battle. Striking Scorpions use advanced positions to get into combat turn 1 potentially, if you go first. So if you set these guys up outside of 9 inches of an enemy unit, when the first turn comes, they can actually move during your first turn and assault. It's not like a reserve ability where you cannot move. If you get the first turn, you can move that 7 inches and then you have a very easy turn 1 charge. However, if you don't go first, you could always use Phantasm to move your Striking Scorpions back into reserve so that they're in relative safety. Or you could reposition them in your own deployment zone, but to be honest with you, probably best to put them in strategic reserve if you don't end up going first. Rangers are probably the most prominent unit that we know have advanced positions, and they use advanced positions to screen against enemy reinforcements and deny early board space. They can also use it to score on secondary objectives as well very early in the game. Also, if you have support weapons, advanced positions can be used to set up the Rangers in a good position for the Resonator Shard stratagem, to give your support weapons a little bit of extra accuracy with rerolls to hit. And then lastly, we have Warwalkers. Now, Warwalkers are a little different than Rangers and Striking Scorpions in that they're not going to be used as a screen or as a unit that wants to get in close combat or anything like that, but they can use advanced positions to be placed either in safe areas outside of your opponent's deployment zone, like let's say that you don't have enough room to deploy within your deployment zone safely behind line of sight blocking terrain. They can go elsewhere to deploy behind that obscuring terrain. And they can also use it aggressively to get better line of sight on enemy units turn 1. When normally most enemies will be out of line of sight, behind obscuring terrain and things like that, Warwalkers can actually use their advanced positions to draw line of sight to those units potentially, which is, in my opinion, one of the better ways to use Warwalkers if you're going to be using their advanced positions ability. So what I wanted to do also in this video is not just talk about how each unit uses the advanced positions, but actually show you guys on a little bit of a diagram. So I'm going to show you a few examples of this. There's 4 examples here. The Striking Scorpions Alpha Strike, which is basically an attempt to get a charge off turn 1 with advanced positions. We have the Rangers Protect and Screen, which basically means that the Rangers are being used as a screening unit to deny enemy reinforcements. We're going to be looking at the Rangers Scout the Enemy Rush, which involves the secondary objective Scout the Enemy and the ability for Rangers to use advanced positions to get into a position to move into the enemy deployment zone turn 1 and score 4 points. And lastly, the Warwalker's Aggressive Hide and Seek, which is the Warwalker's way of getting around obscuring terrain by selecting certain angles using their advanced positions ability in the beginning of the game. So first up, we have the Striking Scorpions, and the Striking Scorpions basically want to deploy outside of 9 inches of both the enemy deployment zone and enemy units. If you do get first turn, it's a pretty easy charge. You move 7 inches up and you can charge 2d6. If you have a Strands of Fate roll, it pretty much guarantees that you'll get that charge off. And honestly, you probably don't need Strands of Fate for this because it's that easy. Unless you know the enemy unit has some sort of mechanic which negates part of your charge distance, should be a fairly easy charge. However, beware. There's a couple things with this. First, your opponent might know you're trying to do this and might screen you out and throw a trash unit in front of a more important unit. This is not going to be that great for you because Striking Scorpions are kind of an expensive unit, so you don't want to throw them away that easily. The other thing is, you might not get first turn. So if you don't get first turn, again, you could redeploy your Striking Scorpions into Strategic Reserve, but of course this isn't always ideal, right? So make sure that if you do try to do this, that A, your opponent's not trying to screen you out, and B, you have those points for Phantasm. If you don't get first turn, you can at least Phantasm the Scorpions back into reserve. Otherwise, it's going to be a very easy kill for your opponent. So in this next example, we have Rangers. Now, Rangers are in those little red dots that you see, and if you look at the diagram, there's actually arrows pointed out. Those are basically the areas in which enemy reinforcements cannot get through because they would be within 9 inches of enemy units, right? So if we deploy them in this way and spread them out a little bit, we can ensure that first turn deep strikes like drop pod assaults and things like that are not going to be able to hit your most vulnerable units. Now, these in the back could be Warwalkers, it could be D cannons, it could be, fire prisms or anything like that. We don't want those units dying first turn. So using our Rangers defensively like this can not only stop assaults, but if you guys haven't heard yet, the new Chaos Demon Codex is pretty insane, and they have some insanely fast models from Slaanesh who can potentially charge you turn 1 out of their deployment zone. So using Rangers to screen out your more important units is going to be a very effective tactic, and most players will have Rangers in their lists. So using Rangers like this with their advanced positions can give you a better bubble so that your troops aren't being charged turn 1. Or alpha striked with some sort of drop pod assault or something like that. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, this isn't shown in the diagram, but if you have an opponent, and this was brought up to me recently, if you have an opponent that's using flyers to kind of go into your deployment zone, like something like the Tyrannid Harpy or the Necron Doom Scythe, or if you're facing another Eldar player, Ynnari, the Hemlock Wraith Fighter ability, then you might want to actually spread your guys out in a way, spread your troops out in a way that makes it very hard for that enemy flyer to get a good position on your troops. So I know for a fact that the Doom Scythe, the range on the weapon is very low. Its main death ray is only a 12-inch range. So if you can position your troops in such a way as to prevent it from being able to land, which remember, even though it's an aircraft, it cannot land on the bases of other models. For example, it could not land on top of your Guardian unit, right? So basically, flyers still need to be able to fit within a certain space. And because their base sizes are big, you can use this to your advantage and spread your troops out to best protect your weaker elements of your army. Now, this could be a little bit hard, depends how many foot troops you actually have. But in certain cases, if you have multiple Ranger units or Guardian units, it can be done. Let's just put it that way. It can be done. Now, will your Guardians die? Most likely, something will die. The Doom Scythe will kill something. the Ynnari Wraith Fighter will kill something, but, again, it's not going to be hitting your most important units. And especially something with the Ynnari Hemlock Wraith Fighter that I've noticed is it's reliant on getting into a position that is central to your army so that it can make the most use out of the Storm of Whispers psychic power, which is basically an AoE Witchfire ability. So by limiting the ability of the Wraith Fighter to do this, you are also inadvertently making it harder for your opponent to then follow up with the Ykarn after that Wraith Fighter does its damage. And then the Ykarn isn't going to have as good of a position and so forth. So being able to deploy your models in such a way that you can block these kind of maneuvers is very important, but it really does take knowledge of what the enemy has in store for you and what the enemy's units do. So always try to keep that in mind when deploying things like Rangers, because you don't want to get caught off guard, especially by some of these Alpha Strike lists that are coming out recently that are winning tournaments and so forth. It's because it's not expected, right? There are ways around it, and there are different things you can do to kind of prevent that a little bit. So Rangers are a great way to do this, but Guardians also aren't that bad either. They just don't have advanced positions. And also, Rangers can not only be used to screen, but they can also use their advanced positions to deploy just outside of 9 inches of the enemy deployment zone. And if you get the first turn, you can move and advance. You need at least a 4, so you'll probably need to save a Strands of Fate dice for this. But if you advance into the enemy deployment zone on turn 1, you're going to be able to score 4 victory points on Scout the Enemy. And if you took the behind enemy lines secondary objective as well, you can also score some points on that. That's an additional 2 points. So that's 6 victory points for 1 Strands of Fate dice and an advanced positions maneuver. Now, of course, enemies also need to be outside of the range, and this is screenable, but oftentimes the enemies aren't going to actually expect this, and you can kind of squeeze by. Even if that unit of Rangers dies, they will have scored 6 points while doing so. Now, as for the Warwalker's advanced positions, the aggressive hide and seek, quote unquote, of the Warwalkers can be used to position them into a place where normally the enemy would be out of line of sight. So in this example, we have a unit of Warwalkers in the corner, far above where it would normally be able to deploy. Normally, the Warwalkers would not be able to see these enemies, but because of advanced positions, we can draw a direct line of sight to that Dreadnought or whatever walker unit that is. And we can also honestly draw a line of sight to the infantry as well. Now, that won't always be the case. Sometimes the infantry will be in different positions or just be in the ruins so you could see them anyway. But oftentimes their most important targets will be behind the ruins, behind obscuring terrain, so they can't be shot at turn 1. So being able to do this with the Warwalkers can give you a much needed first strike if you're looking to destroy a particular dangerous enemy. So in conclusion, I think advanced positions is an ability that has a lot of different applications, and depending on what unit you use it with, these applications can change greatly. But they all have one thing in common, which is they can give you an immediate advantage from turn 1. And again, to get the best out of this ability, you have to be aware of how to use it on each different unit. And based on the unit's own strengths and weaknesses, you will be able to make game-winning moves from turn 1. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Leave me a comment if you think I missed something or you have just general thoughts about the video. And have a good one, everybody. Peace out. I'll see you guys later. Oh, one more thing. Next video coming out, I'm doing a video on the new list that I have been trying out over the past couple weeks. It is a reserve-based list that has the far-flung Craftworld traits, mobile fighters, and webway warriors, and I'm going to let you know how that went. All right, everybody, that's it for today. See you later.